morning, everyone, and welcome to the Traveling Pony Podcast. For today's episode, I'm going to take you along to see what I do to create a podcast episode. As always, I apologize a little bit for the audio. I'm still trying to figure out as well. I have cats in the room. I tell my podcast guests this all the time. They make noise, they do things. One of them sneezing. I can't control that as much as I wish I could. So please bear with me there. So I'm gonna bring you guys along to kind of see what I do for the podcast. And this, I have no idea when it will be releasing, but I was unable to get a podcast guest for the 1st of November, so I will be recording a podcast episode by myself. I try and schedule the podcast guest to come on earlier in the week so I can have a day or two to edit everything because it does take a while. But this past week I've been unable to find anyone and I'm still working for next week. So I've got to record something, so I'm going to record the podcast. When I record a podcast by myself, it is very, very different from me sitting down and recording a podcast episode with a guest. Typically, when I record a podcast episode by myself, it's a little bit more of me rambling on about things. I have an idea, and it's just where will I get to that idea? Versus when I do podcast episodes with guests, it is very concise. I have the questions pre-drafted before the guest ever comes on the show. They are allowed to review the questions, make certain the questions are all right with them, and then we record the episode. Typically, as we record, I might throw in more questions and do things like that, but most of it's pretty written out. You know, I know how to direct the conversation to flow from each question and then to the end. With me, it will not be like that. It will probably consist of me rambling and do what I do best. So I'm gonna though show you what the proper podcast episode that I do should look like. This is my trusty dandy book that I swear has every secret in life to it. So this is what I use to write down all of my podcasts. So the podcast actually begins on a piece of paper. So I'm gonna try and find one that I've posted so that you can kind of see. So it begins on a piece of paper. I kind of write down a few things, and this is kind of my own personal copy. It kind of has my rambling on it, and it will kind of have more of the introduction already written out. This is the copy that is actually sent to whoever I am interviewing. And this is kind of besides the doodle. I got a little bored that day waiting, but so this is gonna have everything written out. It's not gonna have everything that's on the previous page. These are more the questions, more the things that they need to know. I send this to the podcast guest. They review it. They make certain that everything is to their liking, that nothing is too controversial, and they are fine with, answering the questions that I have provided for them. I also too, besides a little switch, write my blog posts out sometimes on here, and you'll see towards the end I'll have some of the things I need to do, and there will also be things like, okay, here's like, I want this to be a blog post, another blog post, and sometimes I'll just have random things like people who say that they want to do a podcast episode and then it never happens, so then they get added to the list in the back. And yeah, so it kind of includes things like extra blogs that I want to do, scheduling type things that I have written out. And this is kind of my book that contains everything that I need for them. So I do not have a fancy mic. Actually, for my singing mic, I have a pretty fancy one. It's a Shure. And that one is a little bit more of your higher end expensive one. I had just this cardioid condenser microphone that I had gotten for not that much. It's cheap compared to the Shure. And I was like, I'm gonna try the Shure. I recorded a few podcast episodes with Shure. I did not love it, or I did some test runs with it. The problem with the Shure is it's a dynamic mic. It is something that we would use a lot more for singing. So you have to really get up to it and be like really loud, and it dampens your voice. So I didn't like how it sounded. It sounds great for singing and everything, but for what I needed, it just wasn't really it. Maybe later on in life I will end up switching back to the Shure microphone, but for right now I use this really easy one. I can let people know which one it is. It's super easy. It comes with the cord. You can get a stand, I suppose. I don't use a stand. I hold the microphone. If I'm not speaking, just turn it away, or even if you don't speak, like, it's not gonna pick it up. I've never had a problem with this mic. It's not staticky. If you're right up in it, it will maybe sometimes have a little bit of a glitch if you're like screaming into it. So if you're gonna scream or be super loud, pull it away. But I've never had a problem with it staticky. It doesn't really get, I'm trying to think of what the word even is. You know, if you're really loud, it doesn't peak. There you go, it doesn't peak too much in my experience. Sometimes when I laugh, it gets a little angry, but that's it. I have this little plug here. So this is what you actually use to connect your microphone to your computer. So it's super easy. It can plug into most things. It's not like one of these ones that you kind of like my Shure. Sometimes I have to plug in through a lot of different systems to get it into my computer. This is easy. One plug into the computer, boom. And I'll show you. When I plug it into my computer, the little blue light turns on, and that means that it's ready to record. So I do not have a super fancy computer right now. I actually was gifted a computer from a family member who's no longer using it, and I just have not set it up. But probably, once I start doing the YouTube stuff, I will most definitely have to, because my computer's almost out of all of its storage, and she's turning 10 in next year, so life is a little slow for her, and not all the software that I need for certain things will download on it. So it will probably start to get replaced, but I love it. And the program that I use to do a lot of my editing and run everything through is Audacity. Audacity is a very hate-love relationship for me. I think it's very confusing for somebody starting out. So definitely when I started editing the podcast, I spent a lot of time on YouTube looking up Audacity stuff, trying to figure out like what in the world any of it meant. As I've done more podcast episodes, I've kind of figured out things, but it's confusing and it's kind of a pain in the butt. Say I had Audacity already opened, at least my Audacity. If I have it open and say I plug my microphone in, the app is already open. It gives me the option to switch between my microphones because, you know, you've got your internal microphone on your computer, you've got this microphone, I've got my Shure set up for it. There's a lot of different microphones for it to choose. So if I go and this microphone is plugged in when the app is already opened, try to select this microphone to record, it will not. It crashes, it refuses to record. So you have to exit out, force quit it, start all over again, relaunch the app, then make certain this is plugged in beforehand, and it will let you choose this microphone. But that has been one of the things that I don't really love about it. It's just another thing. Usually I've got episodes that I am editing when I need to record something, so I gotta make certain everything's saved and I gotta do a lot of other stuff, when it would just be great if I could plug my microphone in and boom, record, but that's not how Audacity is. So Audacity is what I use. There's so many different like editing things. If I'm not mistaken, you can use GarageBand for your podcast. So definitely just take a look and kind of see what's out there. Audacity I already had because of my singing, and my computer can't support some of these other apps. So that's what I chose to use. So when I try and do any form of podcast recording, really make certain that before you go and record for 30-40 minutes that everything is set up properly. So make certain before you go out and record a super long podcast episode that your audio is sounding all right. I've had many times where I start recording an episode and then I just keep going, and by the time I look back and listen to it, I could have changed something and it could have sounded much better. So always make sure to do some testings. So we're gonna do a few testings. My testings aren't amazing. So, all right, hello. I try and do some talking up close, kind of see, and definitely for me because I laugh. And my laugh is what would typically peak a microphone. I am going to laugh a few times just to see if I could peak it and where I need to hold it when it is time to actually record the podcast episode. So once I'm done, I will play it back, and I'll play it hopefully loud enough so you guys can hear it and kind of see what it sounds like. All right, hello. I try and do some talking up close, kind of see, and definitely for me because I laugh. And my laugh is what would typically peak a microphone. I am going to laugh a few times just to see if I could peak it. So there you go. So I like to do something like that. make certain that I'm not accidentally peeking the microphone. Like I said, this mic, super good for anybody who's just wanting to start out. Cheap, doesn't peak, like I can talk right on top of it, which I don't usually. It's just not very comfortable for me. You can talk right on top of it and it really doesn't seem to do much. I mean, at least from my experiences, I don't typically have that problem. Today I'm probably going to record a podcast episode, kind of doing what I'm planning to do with a traveling pony, as well as I really want to do a podcast episode on burnout in the sport. I think it's such an important topic and I would love to discuss it with somebody, but it's been hard to find anyone who wants to discuss certain things. So I'm going to do a topic on burnout, and I'm just going to show you guys kind of what I do for my recording, and I'll give you a sneak peek. As people have told me, they listen to my podcast, they say, wow, Carrie, you have a voice that it's just made for podcast and radio stuff sometimes, because I can switch it so easily. My normal voice here might not be the voice that I would use on my podcast, particularly when I record my openings and endings. If I was smart, I would probably pre-record a opening and ending per podcast episode, but I do not do that because I am not smart and it changes all the time. And why would I have less work for me to do? I just love working so much. So I'm going to record it. I will leave it in this episode and you guys can hear. Probably my voice will change as the episode goes on, which is pretty normal. This is not how I would start my episode. So here we go. And I should say, don't normally wear glasses. Most people don't see me in glasses, but with doing all of the editing, podcast, blog, social media, YouTube, I spend a substantial amount of time on electronics now. So I think it's very important that if you start to get the headaches, these are, this is how you normally see me. These are just normal glasses that have like a blue light filter in them. When I was staring at the computer, I was getting horrible migraines. So yeah, these are kind of my lifesaver right now. I wear them all the time whenever I'm on electronics, recording, staring at a screen. It has definitely helped my eyesight and I don't get nearly as bad migraines as I was before. Here we go. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Traveling Pony Podcast. My name is Carrie Beach and I am your host today. On today's episode, I was unable to get a guest for this week, so you're gonna have to bear with me just a little bit and probably deal with some of my rambling again. Sometimes I listen back. And probably deal with some of my rambling again. Hopefully next week I will be able to find somebody who can join me on the podcast, either on interview or discussion. But I decided since today I will be doing the podcast, I wanted to talk about what the future of this podcast may look like and what I'm kind of hoping will happen. I will probably end up recording this podcast episode first. It is approaching time that I probably have to do my horses soon, but the plan is record this podcast episode, get it out there, probably record another podcast episode, and that one would be focused on burnout. I kind of want to set it up that if I cannot find a guest, I can have a backfall as well. I would like to be producing 2 podcast episodes a week. Would that be possible? Yeah, we're gonna have to see, especially with doing the YouTube channel. I don't know. I'll have to see if my brain can come up with that much content. I'd like to be doing 2 episodes per week. I think that I could make one of the podcast episodes like an interview discussion type format, and then another one more personal, shorter, because usually the interviews are anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. So I would want to make my own personal podcast episodes shorter, probably like a little bit motivational things, just really brief. Some of the podcasts I listen to talk about some motivational like thoughts or whatever entering into the week. So I thought it could be fun to do like Monday motivation, but then Mondays like Monday, Tuesday on the podcast, it got a little close. So then I was thinking maybe Friday I could do one, because Friday's my open day on my social media planning. We're gonna see. So I will record these episodes, probably end up going to take care of my horses in the meantime, and probably end up coming back later to record them. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this little episode. Definitely will be more coming. I'm really excited to try this. I used to have a YouTube before for something completely different, and I did fairly well on it, but I'm kind of past that point in my life a little bit more, which maybe not. Maybe depending on how this turns out, I might get back into it. As you can tell, this is one of many bookshelves. I have more behind me and more on that side. I used to collect a lot of books, so I used to have like a booktube thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy it, please, leave a comment or something. I would love to answer your questions. I will make YouTube videos just answering people's questions. It can be about the traveling pony, it can be about my life, it can be about my barn. I am pretty much an open book. I will discuss my feelings and thoughts pretty openly about most things. There's definitely some things, maybe not so much as others. I really think it's important to kind of discuss things, and I especially think as being a young professional with horses and just with all this type of stuff, I just really want to be honest and upfront and let people know that you are allowed to feel certain feelings, because I experienced so many since doing the podcast, the blog, opening a barn, just these things and these thoughts that I never would have had before, or probably wouldn't have this early on in my life. I hope you guys enjoyed this YouTube episode. Let me know your thoughts, let me know your comments, and I'm really looking forward to filming the next one. It's a lot of fun being on camera too, opposed to just being a voice behind a computer screen. I have one last question, the question that everyone asks. Where will the traveling pony be next? See you next time.